The day I found out my husband had been funneling company contracts to his girlfriend, I was sitting in the conference room on the 14th floor, holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold, waiting for my name to be called. I had been waiting for that moment for 3 years. 3 years of 70-hour weeks. 3 years of flying to client sites on Sunday evenings so I could be there Monday morning. 3 years of missing school plays and dinner tables and the particular kind of quiet that only exists in your own house at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night. My daughter Nora had stopped asking when I'd be home for dinner sometime around her sophomore year. Not because she was angry, because she already knew the answer. I thought it was all about to be worth it. The company was called Alderton and Foss, a mid-sized commercial real estate firm based in Portland, Oregon. I had joined as a project coordinator 11 years earlier, worked my way up to senior account manager, and for the past 2 years I had been running the firm's largest portfolio, a cluster of mixed-use development projects worth just under $40 million. I had built those client relationships from scratch. I knew what our kids' names were. I knew which clients needed a call instead of an email, and which ones needed you to show up in person and shake their hand before they signed anything. My husband, Conrad, was the regional director, which meant, technically, he was my boss. We had been careful about that, or at least I thought we had. We kept things professional at work. We didn't arrive together, didn't leave together, didn't sit next to each other in meetings unless there was no other choice. 14 years of marriage had given us enough practice at being two separate people in the same room. The woman who would eventually take everything I had worked for was named Petra. She had joined the firm 8 months earlier as a client services associate. She was 29, enthusiastic, and had a way of speaking in meetings that made everything sound like she'd just thought of it for the first time and was delighted by her own insight. Conrad had hired her. He told me she had strong instincts. I remember thinking that was a strange thing to say about someone whose main job was scheduling client lunches and preparing presentation decks. I didn't think much of it at the time. The quarterly review meeting was scheduled for a Thursday in March. The whole Portland team would be there, 12 people around a long glass table with Conrad at the head. I had submitted my performance report 2 weeks earlier. It was 40 pages. I had included client satisfaction scores, revenue growth comparisons, renewal rates, a breakdown of the 3 new accounts I had brought in since October. I had even included a letter from one of our longest-standing clients, a developer named Mr. Da Hargrove, who had been with the firm for 9 years and had specifically requested that I remain his point of contact for all future projects. I wore my grey blazer, the one I'd bought for the interview that had gotten me promoted the first time. Conrad opened the meeting the way he always did. A few numbers, a market update, some remarks about Q1 projections. I was watching the clock. I knew my section was coming. I had a short presentation prepared, just 5 slides, clean and straightforward. I wasn't nervous. I had the numbers. The numbers were undeniable. Then Conrad said he wanted to take a moment before the standard review to announce a staffing update. I sat up a little straighter. He said the company had decided to restructure the portfolio management division and create a new senior role, client portfolio director, to consolidate oversight of the major accounts. He said this role would carry an expanded compensation package, a new title, and executive-level access to the board's development committee. I set down my pen. He said it was pleased to announce that Petra would be stepping into that role, effective the following Monday. I don't remember what happened to my face in that moment. I've thought about it many times since. My colleague Rebecca, who sat across from me, told me later that I looked like someone had pressed a pause button on me. Like my whole system just stopped for 3 full seconds. The rest of the table had gone quiet in the particular way that people go quiet when they sense they are witnessing something they are not supposed to see. I looked at Conrad. He looked back at me with an expression I had never seen on his face in 14 years. Not guilt, exactly. Something more like the careful neutrality of a man who has already made peace with a decision and is simply waiting for the room to move on. "Congratulations, Petra," he said. She smiled. I picked up my pen. I clicked it once, twice, and then I set it down again. I took a breath. I said, "That's a significant change to the division structure. I'd love to understand the timeline on this decision." Conrad said the process had been ongoing for several weeks. He said the evaluation had been comprehensive. He said he was confident this was the right direction for the team. I nodded once. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I did not look at Petra again. I made it through the remaining 40 minutes of that meeting without saying anything I could not take back. That is probably the thing I am most proud of in this entire story. That evening, I drove home alone. Nora was at her apartment. She was in her second year at Portland State by then, studying environmental science. Conrad came home around 8. I was at the kitchen table with a glass of water, not drinking it, just holding it. He sat down across from me. He said it like he just hadn't gone the way I expected. He said it wanted to explain. He said that the board had been looking for someone with a fresher perspective to take on the director role. He said it wasn't a reflection of my performance. He said it was about where the company was going. I asked him when he had started seeing Petra. The silence that followed was 4 seconds long. I counted. He said it like he didn't know what I was talking about. I said that was fine. I said I just wanted to understand what I was looking at. He said I was exhausted and maybe I should get some sleep and we could talk more this weekend. I said that sounded like a good idea. I went upstairs. I sat on the edge of the bed in the dark for a long time. I was not yet ready to feel everything that was waiting for me on the other side of that moment. But I was already thinking. The thing people don't understand about working in client-facing real estate for 11 years is that you develop a very particular skill set. You learn to read contracts carefully. You learn to notice when something has been moved or changed or omitted. You learn that the paper trail is always longer than people think. I started paying attention differently the next morning. I was still going to work. I was still managing my accounts. I trained Petra on the Hargrove file myself. Conrad had asked me to, and I did it without complaint, because I wanted access to the handoff process. I wanted to see exactly what she knew and exactly how she had gotten this far. Within 2 weeks, it was clear. She knew what he had told her. She had no independent knowledge of the clients, the contracts, or the renewal terms. She was reading from notes that Conrad had written for her. The more interesting discovery came from the billing records. Our company used a project management system called Fieldstone, common in commercial real estate, tracks hours, client interactions, expense submissions. I still had full access. I started running reports late at night, cross-referencing Petra's logged client time against the actual meeting records and travel receipts. What I found was that for 6 of the past 8 months, she had been logging client hours for accounts she had never actually contacted. The hours were there. The interactions were not. Someone had been approving those logs. I printed everything, not on the office printer. I drove to a Staples in Beaverton and paid cash. I started a folder, then a second folder, then a binder. I also called an attorney, a woman named Ms. Calloway who had been recommended to me by a friend who had gone through a difficult divorce 3 years earlier. I sat in her office on a Tuesday afternoon and I walked her through everything I had. She listened without interrupting. At the end she said, "You've done this before?" I said, "Done what?" She said, "Built a case." I told her I had spent 11 years making sure clients felt they could trust me. I figured the skill transferred. I filed for divorce 6 weeks after the promotion meeting. Conrad didn't see it coming. He came home on a Wednesday evening to find a copy of the filing on the kitchen table, next to a note that said I had moved into a short-term rental and would be in touch through my attorney. I had taken my personal files, my laptop, my grandmother's jewelry, and the espresso machine we had bought together on a trip to Seattle in 2019. He could have everything else. He called me 11 times that night. I let them all go to voicemail. What I did not tell him, what I did not tell anyone yet, was that I had already reached out to 3 of the firm's major clients, not in any official capacity, just conversations, old relationships, coffee with Mr. Hargrove, who had known me for 9 years and who, when I explained that I was leaving the firm and would likely be starting something new, said, "Tell me where you land and I'll follow you." That was the first domino. I had spent 11 years building trust with people who moved significant amounts of money. When I told them I was going independent, that I was setting up a boutique commercial real estate advisory firm, small and specific, no bureaucracy, direct access to me, the response was faster than I had expected. By the end of April, I had letters of intent from 4 clients. 2 of them were in Alderton and Foss's top-tier portfolio. I did not solicit them in violation of any agreement. I had checked. My non-solicitation clause was narrow and had a 6-month window. I had not yet crossed it. Ms. Calloway reviewed every communication before I sent it. In May, I registered Beridian Advisory Group as an LLC in the state of Oregon. I rented a small office in the Pearl District. Nothing impressive. 1 room with good light and a decent view of the West Hills. I hired 1 person, a former colleague named Robert, who had left Alderton and Foss the previous year under circumstances that had also involved Conrad making a decision that wasn't his to make. We opened quietly, no announcement, no press release, just work. The billing records I had collected during my final weeks at the firm were submitted to Oregon's Bureau of Labor and Industries, along with a formal complaint about wage irregularities and the falsification of performance logs. I had also provided a copy to the firm's external auditors, whose contact information I had located in a public disclosure filing from 3 years earlier. The investigation took 4 months. In September, I was meeting with a client at a restaurant in the Northwest District when my phone buzzed with a news alert. Alderton and Foss had announced a leadership transition. The regional director position was being eliminated as part of a restructuring. Conrad was quoted in the brief statement as saying he was grateful for his years with the firm and excited for what comes next. Petra's name did not appear in the announcement. I set down my phone and finished my coffee. I want to be clear about something because I know how these stories can sound. I did not do any of this to destroy Conrad. I did it because what he had done was wrong, and because the systems that were supposed to catch it hadn't, and because I had spent 3 years building something real and I was not willing to let it disappear without a record. The audit findings were what they were. I didn't manufacture them. I just made sure someone with the authority to look actually looked. Nora found out about the divorce from me in person at her apartment the week after I filed. We sat on her small couch with the window open and I told her everything. Not the work parts, the personal parts. I told her that her father and I had grown into 2 different people who wanted 2 different things, and that I was sorry it had taken me this long to be honest about it. She was quiet for a while. Then she said, "Mom, I've been watching you disappear into that job for 4 years. I'm just glad you finally picked yourself." I didn't cry until I got back to my car. The following spring, Beridian Advisory Group brought in its first 7-figure contract. It was the Hargrove account, a new development project in the Hillsborough corridor, the kind of work I had been doing for years, but now without anyone between me and the client, without anyone editing my recommendations or rerouting my credit. Robert knocked on my office door that afternoon and held up 2 cups of coffee like a toast. I told him to stop being dramatic. He said someone had to be. The thing I keep coming back to when I think about all of it, the meeting, the silence, the drive home, the folders in the binder, the months of quiet, careful work, is a conversation I had with Nora about 3 weeks before I filed the complaint. We were on the phone and she asked me if I was scared. I thought about it honestly before I answered. I said I was. I said that for most of my career I had been afraid to take up too much space, to ask for too much, to seem difficult or demanding or ungrateful. I had made myself small in 100 small ways because it felt safer, and because I believed that if I just kept doing excellent work, the work would speak for itself. I said I had finally understood that excellent work only speaks for itself when the right people are listening. Nora said, "So make sure you're the one in charge of the room." She's 22 now. She graduates in June. Environmental science, minor in policy. She has her father's eyes, which is the only thing about this situation I haven't entirely made peace with. I'll be in the front row. I think about the moment Conrad said Petra's name in that conference room, and what strikes me now isn't the anger. It's how calm I felt. Not numb. Calm. Like some part of me had already known, and had been quietly gathering its strength for longer than I'd admitted. That's the thing nobody tells you about betrayal. It doesn't always arrive as a shock. Sometimes it arrives as a confirmation of something you already felt in your chest at 2 a.m, but were too afraid to look at directly. What I did in the months that followed wasn't remarkable in any dramatic sense. I didn't make speeches. I didn't confront anyone in a hallway. I just decided that if I was going to lose everything I had built inside someone else's walls, I was going to build something inside my own, and I was going to do it the same way I had done everything else that actually mattered in my life. Carefully, honestly, without cutting corners. That last part mattered more to me than I expected. I had every reason to be careless. I had every reason to burn things down quickly and loudly. But I kept thinking, the reason Conrad's version of events eventually collapsed wasn't because I wanted it to. It was because it wasn't true, and things that aren't true have a structural problem. They require constant maintenance. You have to keep adjusting the story. You have to keep managing who knows what. Eventually, the weight of all that maintenance catches up with you. The truth doesn't require any of that. You just have to be willing to document it, protect it, and wait. I had spent 11 years developing the discipline to do careful work, even when no one was watching. I used to think that was just professional habit. I understand now that it was a form of integrity I had built without realizing it. The kind that doesn't disappear when the circumstances get hard, because it was never dependent on circumstances to begin with. And then there's Nora. She said something to me that I keep returning to. I'm just glad you finally picked yourself. She's 22. I don't know where she learned that kind of clarity. Probably not from watching me shrink myself for a decade inside a job that was never going to give me what I was worth. Maybe she learned it by watching what happened when I finally stopped. I used to believe that if I worked hard enough and kept my head down and stayed grateful, the system would eventually recognize me. I know now that systems don't recognize anything. People recognize people. And the people who matter most are the ones you've treated with honesty over a long enough period that they trust you without needing a reason. Mr. Hargrove didn't follow me to Meridian because I asked him to. He followed me because 9 years of showing up exactly as I said I would had made the decision obvious to him. That's the whole lesson, really. Not the revenge, not the acquisition, not the moment Conrad's name disappeared from the company website. The lesson is that your reputation, the real one, built from how you actually behave when there's nothing in it for you, is the only asset that travels with you when everything else gets taken away. I'm not the same person I was the morning I walked into that quarterly review in my grey blazer. I'm harder in some places and softer in others. I ask for more. I apologize less for asking. I have a small office in the Pearl District with good light, a partner I trust, and clients who call me directly when something matters. That's enough. Most days it's more than enough.